Hey besties, it's Sarah. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing my quarterly reading wrap up. I was supposed to do this at the end of March. The time just got away from me. And so I thought better late than never. And so we're actually going to be talking about most of the books that I've read for the last 4 months. There are a few that I read that I'm not going to talk about yet because they're going to come out in videos soon. But I think there's about 30-ish books. I'll put the exact number in the title. I'm not exactly sure. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you'll know that whenever I do these quarterly reading wrap-ups, I like to mix up the format. And today we're going to do something I've never done before, which is a mukbang. So I'm going to eat this giant sushi platter. I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish it. And then I have some cheese wontons, crab rangoon, whatever you want to call it. I will order this if it's on your menu. I've even been to a place where it was called a cheese bag. I will order it if you have fried cream cheese in some way. And if there's crab in it, even better. I think these ones are just cream cheese. So I'm going to eat these. I'm going to eat all the sushi. I think I've got some California rolls, spicy tuna, spicy salmon, an Alaska roll, a Boston roll, also a dog hair from my dog. So one thing we got to get out of the way is that you cannot critique me on how I use my chopsticks because I just know it's not going to be correct. And secondly, I love spicy mayo with my sushi, which I know is sacrilege, but this is not enough for all of this. So I also made my own. I don't think mine is as good as theirs, but I tried my best. I've never done a mukbang before. If anything, we can consider this a bookbang. I think I want to start with my cheese wontons, and we're going to go through the books by star rating. So we're going to start with the 5 stars and go all the way down to the 1 stars because there are some pretty bad books that I've read recently. Oh my god, how does one chew and then also eat at the same time? What? That's not what I meant to say. I meant to say talk. The first 5-star book we're going to talk about, oh my god, this is falling apart, is Hellbent by Lee Bardugo. I read this for my video where I was reading Booktuber's worst books of the year. I obviously disagree with them because I gave it 5 stars. I loved it so much. This is the sequel to Ninth House. So if you don't know what Ninth House is about, basically it follows this girl, Alex Stern. And she used to be a drug addict. And one day she overdoses and she's not doing too hot. She's in the hospital and she has a gift of seeing ghosts. That's actually why she does drugs. She tries to run away from her problems by doing that. And Yale shows up in her hospital room and they're like, hey girl, what if you came to Yale, full ride, don't care about your grades, doesn't matter that you're a high school dropout, and you will oversee these like secret societies to make sure they're not like doing anything bad because you can see ghosts and you can also help them with their ceremonies and whatever. And then she's mentored by this guy. Oh my god, this is really bad. I think I'm gonna have to get a fork. Please hold. I'm gonna be extra white and use a fork. Alex goes to Yale, hijinks ensue. There's a lot of stuff that happens in the first book. The second book is following her as she tries to figure out where Darlington went because he went missing. And it is so good. It's so good. I loved it. The sushi is also very much giving budget. Also, the fork is working. So, anyhow, I think the Alex Stern series would make an amazing television show. It's written so episodically. I thought Hellbent was a perfect sequel. I feel like you got to see a lot more of the characters. And it also felt like all the plots were interesting to me. The A plot, the B plot, the C plot. Every little plot that was going on in the book, I was really interested. I read it all in one sitting, and it is not a short book. I stayed up till like 6 a.m. reading it, and I loved it so much. The next book that we're going to talk about is You Again by Kate Goldbeck. This is a romance book that is very lightly based on When Harry Met Sally. There are some similarities. I actually had never seen that movie before reading this book. And I gotta say, I watched it on a plane recently and I was not live off loving as much as the other girlies. I think what I liked about it is it had that like nostalgic 90s rom-com vibe, but Harry was kind of an asshole. I was not really getting the appeal of Harry at all, like not even a little bit. If I was Sally, I would have run the other way. So in this book, we're following Ari and, oh my god, what was the guy's name? I don't remember his name. But anyway, the guy is a failed chef. Like he tried to open a restaurant, it didn't go well. He's not doing well in life. And then Ari is a stand-up comedian. She hasn't really found her place in life yet. So what makes it similar to When Harry Met Sally is that it takes place in New York and these characters just keep crossing paths over many years before they finally decide to be friends and like each other. When they first meet each other, the guy is dating Ari's roommate and they have an argument when they first meet, and then every time they see each other it's very unpleasant. And then finally later down the line they both recently have gone through some breakups and they start bonding and they become friends, which is also kind of similar to the plot of When Harry Met Sally. The characters in this are very messy, very unlikable in some ways, and I have seen other people struggle with it. I know I was just saying that Harry from When Harry Met Sally wasn't great, but I think I liked this book a little bit more. It was a more updated take on it, so there was not really any like misogyny or any of the things that I saw in that character in the movie. And so I just really enjoyed, especially Ari being the female character that was kind of a hot mess, because I feel like typically that's the guy in a book. I feel like Kate Goldbeck does third person limited really well, because there would be scenes where Ari and the guy were together and it would be third person limited on one of them, and then she would like shift the perspective and it felt very cinematic, and I just really loved it a lot. I thought it was so good. One thing I'm noticing about filming a mukbang is that it makes your mouth water a lot. I feel gross. The next 5-star read is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. This is another sequel to one of my favorites from last year. The first book, Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, is obviously following our titular character, Emily Wilde. She is a professor and she studies fae. And so in the first book, she's traveling to this like snowy remote village to study like winter fairies. And when she gets there, she offends the locals by like not accepting help from them. And then after that, they don't really want to talk to her, which is not great for her research. But she's in luck because her academic rival, Wendell Bambleby, shows up and he charms everyone in the village, and they have a very complicated relationship because sometimes he steals her work and they banter a lot, but they are still friends. And so they end up getting closer over this trip, and there's a little bit of a romance between them. What I like about this series is that the fae are not romanticized. A lot of them are very dark and evil. There's a few of them that are good. They're all very mixed. So in the second book, we're following all of our beloved characters and they are trying to find a way into fairy. And so that's why it's called Map of the Otherlands. In the first one, she was writing an encyclopedia, and this one she's making a map. And so they're kind of going around doing that. And I loved it so much. It was so cute. There's this one little fairy named Poe that I love. And then there's also an animal companion named Shadow. He's like this dog and he is super cute. We're also introduced to some other new characters in this. I will say I did not love it as much as the first book, but I still really loved it, and I cannot wait for more. I would honestly like this series to be like 10 books. Okay, the next book is Funny Story by Emily Henry, which I'm so happy to report was a 5-star read for me. I loved it. So in this book, we're following Daphne, and she is engaged to the love of her life, and he goes on his bachelor trip, and he has always had a female best friend that he's known since childhood, and he always told Daphne, don't worry about her, there's nothing wrong with her, she's a cousin to me, she's a friend to me, she's like a sister to me, all the things that guys like to say. So he goes on his bachelor trip, but then his female friend confesses her love to him, and so then he leaves Daphne to go be with her. And the girl also had a boyfriend named Miles, and so now Miles and Daphne are left heartbroken, and they decide to be roommates because Daphne has to move out of where she's living because Miles' ex-girlfriend is now moving in there, and it's a really awkward situation. And so Daphne moves in, and her and Miles are very opposite. Miles is a bartender, he's a pothead, he just lives a very loose and disorganized life, while Daphne is a librarian and she's very type A, she keeps a calendar, she's very like put together. So they decide to actually start fake dating to make their exes jealous, but then when they start fake dating, they become best friends, and then it kind of becomes friends to lovers. So it's fake dating, friends to lovers. Could not think of a better combination of tropes that I love. I also loved the romance between Daphne and Miles because I felt like they were very opposite, but they really balanced each other out. And Miles kind of just felt like a random guy. I liked that. It felt very realistic. The characters were great. The way that it was built up, I liked the A plot, the B plot, the C plot. Apparently I'm going to say that when I'm reviewing now. That's a new thing that I'm saying. I hated Happy Place. Emily Henry just smited me when I was saying that. I hated Happy Place so much, and so I feel like this was just such a nice relief to finally have an Emily Henry book that I loved, because even Book Lovers, I wasn't the hugest fan. Like I gave it like 4 stars, and so I was just so happy to be back in the 5-star zone with this Emily Henry. Okay, the final 5-star book we're going to talk about is Good Girls Don't Die by Christine Henry. And I feel that this is a controversial pick because a lot of people do not like this book. I will say this book is not for everyone. This is my 5-star book. I'm not even recommending that you go out and read it because it's super campy, super silly, super weird. It's not really for someone who wants something that like makes a lot of sense. It's very heavy-handed. So in this book, we are following 3 characters who wake up in like different situations. Like one of the women wakes up in this town and people are claiming this guy's her husband and this is her daughter and all these things, and she's like, I don't remember this life, like this is not my life. And then the second story is this woman who ends up at this cabin with her friends, and it's giving very much like Cabin in the Woods vibes. And then the third one is a woman who wakes up in a maze, and so it's kind of like Maze Runner meets Hunger Games sort of thing. And so they're all trying to figure out like why they're in this situation, and I loved this so fucking much. It is just so fun. It's one of those stories that's really fast paced. If you like horror movies or commentary or like very like campy, oh my god, this is falling apart, let me eat it. As I was saying, if you like campy horror or meta things or things that like examine the horror genre, then I think that you would like this. I will say the ending is a little unsatisfactory. The way that it closes up is something that could leave you wanting. I didn't really care because I loved the book so much outside of that, so that's why I still gave it 5 stars. There are some plot holes. There are some things that might make you mad for reading it, but for me, I just had so much fun, and I rarely have fun when I'm reading. I just want to have fun. Girls just want to have fun. We're about to enter the 4 stars, but I feel like I want to eat a little bit before I continue. My mouth is watering so much. Okay, I think what I don't like about this is I don't think I like the spicy seasoning. I think the spicy salmon is, I don't know, salmon just in sushi is a weird texture. All right, now we're gonna move on into the 4-star books. I have 8 of them. The first one being Hench by Natalie Zena Walshot. So you might be confused by me putting this here because often I claim that this is a 5-star book, and it is, but it isn't. I don't know how to explain it. It's a 4-star that's a 5-star. This is a book that's basically like the show The Boys on Amazon, but in book form. So we're following our main character Anna, and she is a henchman for a villain, and one day she has to go on site because normally she just does data entry, and she ends up getting injured by a superhero, and it kind of becomes her villain origin story. And so the whole book is her trying to get revenge on superheroes. So it's very much giving The Boys, like I was saying, but Anna is honestly maybe even more evil than Billy Butcher. I can't really decide, but I think what makes this book 4 stars this time is that it didn't read quite as good the second time. I don't know how to explain it. I did really enjoy it, obviously, because I really like it. I like all the characters and whatnot, but I will say this time listening to the audiobook, I really didn't like the audiobook narrator, and I feel like that affected my reading. I was also doing this reading challenge where I couldn't listen to audiobooks unless I was walking, and I feel like that also affected it because then I was like dreading going for walks because it wasn't a new book. So all this together made me just like put it in the 4-star section. I do like this book, and I think it is 5-star. I think if you're looking for a book about superheroes, you will love this, and there is a sequel coming out later this year that I'm so excited for. But I don't know, there was just something when I was like putting this list together that I was like, you know what, I'm gonna put this in the 4-star. It's probably like a 4.5 star. I don't know, there was something about rereading that like lessened the shine. I don't know how else to explain it. Next is a very surprising one. I read this for my Patreon version of Reading Booktuber's Worst, and that is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. I really loved this book. I think it actually might be my second favorite Grady Hendrix after My Best Friend's Exorcism. I know that's a crazy thing to say because so many of the girls were hating How to Sell a Haunted House, but I just like this so much. This book is following a brother and sister who are in their late 30s, early 40s, and their parents die under mysterious circumstances, and so they have to go back to their childhood home in order to sell it. And so it's all about the stages of grief and them dealing with their parents' death, but then also dealing with their relationship because they have a very complicated family bond. And so we kind of get into why this is, how this happened, and then there's also an evil puppet that goes on. And the evil puppet is normally what takes people out of the story for sure, because people go in thinking it's just gonna be a regular haunted house with ghosts, but no, there is an evil possessed puppet. Also, this spicy mayo I made is so bad. It was so bad. Anyway, I really enjoyed How to Sell a Haunted House. I enjoyed the exploration of grief, and I really liked the way that it was written, and I liked the puppet too. I thought the puppet part was good, and I know that that is controversial to say. The next book is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I did give this 4 stars. I will say it is a little bit of a forgettable book for me. I have not thought about it a single time since I read it. So I don't think this is my favorite book, but I don't want to rate it lower than 4 stars because I thought the writing was really fantastic. But my personal reading experience wasn't like, oh my god, I'm in love the way that other people are. So we're following this main character, Addie LaRue. You probably have heard of this book, but I'll go over it anyway. So Addie grew up like in the 1700s, I think, and she is supposed to marry this guy that she doesn't want to marry. So she runs into the woods and she prays after dark, and this demon shows up and grants her a wish that she'll live forever and that she doesn't have to marry this guy. But she doesn't know that his deal comes with some stipulations. And so basically she will live forever, but no one will remember her. So if you meet her and you say hi to her and then you look away, you'll forget her, and you'll look back and be like, hey, who are you? And so this just keeps happening to her for like hundreds and hundreds of years, and she keeps living out of spite. Like the demon keeps coming to her and it's like, do you want to give up yet? And she's like, no. And so she's just like trying to spite him. And then one day she meets this guy named Henry who can remember her, and so they start a romance. But I'm so sorry, Henry was giving nothing. Henry was very nothing burger to me. He was kind of a loser, to be honest. Like, I did not like Henry. I like the demon character way more, but the romance is not really between her and the demon, and I wanted that. I am like everyone who would forget Addie when she would walk away. I would like there to be a sequel. I know that there won't be a sequel because I went to a talk that Victoria Schwab was doing where she literally said that she would never write a sequel. I guess this book is very near and dear to her heart. She thought of it in her early 20s, and it took her like over a decade to write it. And she actually did say that she identifies the most with Henry's character. So I'm so sorry, Miss V.E. Schwab, but that character was not good. The next book is The Wallflower Wager by Tessa Dare. This is the 3rd book in the Girl Meets Duke series. And in this, we're following a girl and she meets a duke. Although this time he's not actually Duke. I think his last name is just Duke, and that's how Miss Tessa Dare got that to work. But she is single. She's been single for all of her 20s. She doesn't have any suitors because she is very quirky and she keeps a lot of animals. She has like a menagerie at her manor. So the love interest moves in next door to her, and he is new money. Like, he buys this estate trying to make it over. He's like a house flipper and he wants to make a bunch of money and then leave. And her pets are preventing him from doing that. And so they strike a wager, a deal. And so he's like, if I can find homes for all these animals to be adopted, will you give them up so that I can have the value of the property go up, because your goat in the backyard is not doing it for me? And so she agrees, and then through that they start to fall in love, they start having sex, and it's a whole cute little thing. This is so adorable, especially if you like animals and books, which, as we all know, I love a little pet in a book. I do. And I love a goat, and I love an otter, and I love a cat, and I love a little dog in a wheelchair, because there is a dog in a wheelchair. And this book was just so cute. Next up, we have 2 books by the same author. We have Flawless and Heartless by Elsie Silver. This is the first 2 books in the Chestnut Spring series, which is a cowboy romance series. And so in the first book, Flawless, we're following this girl who works for her dad, and he is an agent for athletes that do bull riding. The male love interest, Rhett, is one of these bull riders that her dad manages. And so the girl, Summer, she actually gets assigned to babysit Rhett because he does something at the beginning of the book that causes the media to go crazy, and it's like affecting his sponsors and his career. And so her dad, obviously as his agent, is very concerned. And so he's like, you need to follow Rhett around, help him on this like PR tour, like help him kind of improve his image. And while they are on this little tour together, there's proximity and they start to fall in love, and it's very cute. I loved it so much. I thought this was so great. I did not think that I would be somebody that liked cowboy romance, but slap my ass, say yeehaw, because I had a great time. Save a horse, ride a cowboy. That's all I can really say. The second book, Heartless, is about a single dad, Cade. He's the brother of Rhett, and then Summer's best friend, Willa. Basically, Cade, like I said, is a single dad, and over the summer he needs extra help watching his 5-year-old son. And so Willa gets hired because Summer's like, you should hire my friend. And so as Willa is the nanny, they start to fall in love. And this was also very cute. I did not like this as much as Flawless because I feel like the sex scenes were raunchier. Like, there's this one scene where they have sex at a kid's birthday party, like not in front of the kids, like away in the kitchen, but it was in one of those situations where at any point a child could walk in, and that made me feel really weird. And there was also more fluids in this book, which I was not loving, but it was still very adorable. And weirdly, I like Cade and Willa more as a couple. Like, I like those characters more than I liked Rhett and Summer. But there was just something about the writing in Heartless that I liked less, if that makes any sense. But I gave both of them 4 stars. So I really like them, and I am excited to continue the series. I think there's 5 books in the series, and I think it's really great. If you're looking for cowboy romance, I definitely think you should pick it up. The hype is real. The hype makes sense. The final book that we have in the 4-star section is The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin. This is the sequel to the 5th season, which was one of my favorite fantasy books that I read last year. I did give the 5th season 5 stars. This book definitely felt like a second book. It was giving middle book syndrome. There was just some stuff in it where it kind of made it drag on. This is a series following these characters that are earthbenders, and so they can control like the earth's core and like rocks and different things. And in this world, every once in a while we suffer this thing called the 5th season, which is kind of a bunch of natural disasters, and it's sort of like an apocalypse type situation. And the earthbender people are the only people that can kind of help try to still the earth and like make it work. But in this society, people are also afraid of the earthbenders because they're so powerful, and so they make them go to like this special school, and they are very marginalized and kind of discriminated against. So in the first book, we're following 3 different characters with this earthbending ability. The first one is a mother whose son was just murdered by her husband because he found out that the son was an earthbender, like she was hiding her abilities. The second one is a little girl that's going to the fulcrum, which is the earthbender school where they get trained. And then the third one is someone who's like leaving the fulcrum. I think her name is like Cyanide, and it's all about her going on this journey and like discovering things about the society. And it is just so masterfully done. I loved it so much. The second book, like I said, it lagged a little bit. There were some new perspectives that I did really enjoy, but there were other aspects that I just kind of like thought were lacking. Like there was this one character from the first book that her perspective just like, it wasn't giving. But I still am very excited to read the conclusion of the third book. I feel like it's going to be really good, and I have a feeling that it could be a 5 star. So this might be like a 5, 4, 5 kind of trilogy. Okay, now we're moving in to the 3-star books. The first one being The Wisteria Society for Lady Scoundrels. This is a Regency urban fantasy type book about these women who are pirates, but they don't man ships, they man houses. So they fly around in these houses, and they're in this like society for lady scoundrels. And the main character is this girl at the very beginning who has an assassin come after her, but then her and the assassin start to fall in love, and hijinks kind of ensue throughout the whole book. And I didn't love this as much as other people. I thought it was really long for what it was, and I was really bored a lot of the time. I loved so many of the concepts. I thought it was so campy, it was so fun, but the actual execution of it just left me wanting. I do think I'm gonna give this series a second chance, and I'm going to pick up the second book in the series, because the second book in the series is following different characters that I'm actually excited to read about. So I will have to report back on if I change my opinion about the series or not, but right now I don't love the first book as much as other people. It's been recommended to me quite a few times, and I just didn't love it as much as the other girlies, and it was very sad for me. Okay, now we have The Governess Game by Tessa Dare. This is the second book in the Girl Meets Duke series. I know I was saying earlier that I love Tessa Dare and everything she does is perfect, but then I remembered that I had read The Governess Game and I didn't like it. I honestly blacked it from my memory because of how much I didn't like it. I almost gave this book 2 stars, but I'm trying to be respectful to Tessa Dare because the writing is not bad, the sex scenes are fine, everything about it is fine. I just did not like the characters. So in this book, we're following this girl, Alexandra, I think is her name. Her main way of making money is that she fixes clocks. So she goes around to rich people's houses and asks like the servants like if they need their clocks adjusted, and that's what she does. And so one day she shows up at this estate and she's like, hey, clocks. And then they're like, oh my god, are you here to interview for the governess job? And she's like, no. But then she ends up getting interviewed anyway, and then the Duke is like, oh my god, you're perfect, because he has these 2 adopted children. I don't remember what his relation is, but he adopts them, and so he's looking for a governess. And he's like, you're perfect for the job, like here's a shit ton of money. And so she says no initially, but then she ends up falling in, I think, a river, and her clock tools get ruined, and so she goes back to him and she's like, okay fine, I will be the governess, and then they fall in love. But the issue is that Alexandra actually met this man like a year prior at a bookstore, and so this book is very much giving she fell first, not he fell first. She, the woman, fell first. And I cannot explain to you how much of a sin that is in my book, in my eyes. I don't want to read about a woman falling in love with a man before he knows that she exists. That is not what I want to read. I want to read about a man simping for a woman, and that is not what this is. It takes so long for this man to realize her value. Like, he wants her sexually for most of the book, but it's all sexual, and he keeps talking about her ass and stuff, and it just was not giving the cuteness that I expect from Tessa Dare. So as I speak about it, am I convincing myself that it's actually a 2-star book? Yes, I am, but we're gonna leave it in this category for now. Okay, the next book is What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. This is a horror retelling of an Edgar Allan Poe story that I've actually never read. So in this retelling, we're following this non-binary character that is traveling to visit their childhood friends because the girl, like the sister, is sick. She has this illness, and so our main character is going to like check on her, and our main character is also a soldier, and there's like this weird war going on. They're from this fictional place called Galatia or something, and then there's mushrooms. That's all I can really say about this book because I honestly didn't like it. I also want to give this book 2 stars, but I was trying to be respectful to Miss T. Kingfisher because I love her as well, but this book was giving me nothing. Like, it was so short but so boring. So bored. I was bored the whole time. I didn't like the ending, I didn't like the beginning, I didn't like the middle, I didn't like anything about this, and maybe it's because I don't know the Edgar Allan Poe story, but I was not loving it. Up next we have The Adventures of Amina Al-Sarafi. This is a book by Shannon Chakraborty, who wrote the Daevabad trilogy, which is one of my favorite fantasy trilogies. Unfortunately, I didn't love this as much as City of Brass. I just thought it was lacking. I also read this a few months after I read Trust of the Emerald Sea, so I'd already read another pirate book, and this pirate book just like wasn't giving as much. We're following our main character Amina Al-Sarafi, and she is a very notorious sorry. She's a very notorious pirate who has retired, but this woman approaches her and is like, hey girl, I got some blackmail on you, so you need to go out into the ocean and go find my granddaughter who ran away. And so Amina has to come out of retirement, and she goes on these adventures. She gets her old crew back together, and it's all about what happens after that. It is a medieval fantasy book, and Shannon Chakraborty obviously took a lot of inspiration from world religion. So there's a lot of religion in this, and as someone with religious trauma, I just don't enjoy reading about religious people. I just don't. And I'm sorry if you find that offensive. I just don't. And our main character Amina is a very devout Muslim, and then other people on her ship are like Christian, and there's some people who are Jewish. What the author did really great is that none of these religions are painted as being better than the other. They all kind of live in harmony together, and Amina is very respectful of other people's religions. But there's just like a lot of talk about religion on a lot of the pages and talking about God and different things, and that's just not my cup of tea, and I don't really want that in my fantasy books. I don't mind when there's like a made-up religion, but when it's based on like real world religion, it just hits a little too close to home for me, because there is a main character who is Christian, which is obviously my background, and I just didn't love it. I didn't love it. So 3 stars. And I don't think I will be reading the sequel unless somebody reads it and is like, Sarah, you have to read this. But I think I probably will not do that. And I think if you're looking to read this author, I would definitely recommend reading City of Brass, like the David trilogy, before you read this. That bite I just took of sushi was so fishy tasting, which I know is crazy to say because I'm eating sushi, but it literally tasted like the actual ocean, and I did not like that. Maybe it was because I was talking about pirates. I don't know. I didn't like that though. Okay, up next we have Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson. Riley, if you're watching this, I hope that you have stopped listening, because I know I originally said that I was going to rate Bloom 4 stars, but I have to retroactively rate it 3 stars because I didn't really like this book, unfortunately. It's a horror novella following this woman who broke up with her boyfriend and then moves, I believe, down south to be a professor. And she goes to the farmer's market one day and she sees this woman named Ash. And she's like, oh my God, that is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. I'm in love with her. But the thing is, she's never liked women before. Like, this is a new feeling for her. So she's kind of discovering her bisexuality. And so she starts a relationship with this woman. And in the first half of the book, it's romance. It's like amazing. But then as the book goes on, there starts to be red flags that maybe Ash isn't exactly who she says she is. And things start to get crazy. And I loved the premise of this book. I loved it so much. I think the execution felt a little short for me. There were a lot of things that I liked about it. I definitely want to read more from Delilah S. Dawson. I think that she's really creative. One thing that I really didn't like about this book is that I had checked the author's social media at one point because I was looking to see if there was going to be an audiobook, and she actually had spoiled the book and like talked about what the twist is. And I get that the twist is not supposed to be something that you don't figure out. It's kind of obvious. There's hints dropped. I just personally would have loved to be able to figure that out myself and look at the clues myself. And I'm honestly very upset that the author would write what the ending was, basically. It just kind of ruined the reading experience for me, and I was finding it hard to like fully enjoy the book. Like I said, I really did enjoy it. Like, maybe it's like a 3.5 star instead of being a 3 star, but I don't know. It just doesn't fully feel like a 4 or 5 star to me, just because of how much it dragged too, because it's not very long. Like, it's only like, I think it's under 250 pages, and there were times, because I was physically reading it, where I was just like slogging through. Maybe I would have enjoyed it more on audio, because I do read mostly by audiobooks, and so this one I had to kind of, you know, dust off my old reading with my eyes ability, and maybe that was also an issue. The next book is Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. This is the second book in the companion series after Part of Your World. And so in this book, we're following Bree, who was the best friend of the woman from the first book. The first book was amazing. I give it 5 stars. It was one of my favorite books that I read last year. And a lot of people said that they loved Yours Truly even more. But I hate to be the bearer of bad news. That's just simply not true. I did not like this book nearly as much. I did not like Bree that much as the main character. Bree is recently going through a divorce. So her husband cheated on her and she's in a bad spot mentally, and then also her younger brother needs, I think, a new kidney, and so she's just very stressed out, and she's a doctor in the emergency room, so life is stressful. And then this new doctor comes to the hospital, and his name is Jacob, and they get off on the wrong foot and have a little bit of a misunderstanding. And so Jacob starts writing Bree letters in order to tell her that he's sorry, because he struggles with really intense anxiety, and he finds that writing to people helps him be less stressed. So they start writing letters back and forth, and that's how they start to fall in love. And I really did enjoy that part of the book. Like, the first 25% I was really living, laughing, and loving. But then as we got to the midpoint, the miscommunication trope in this is so insane. Like, there's this one part where Bree overhears Jacob talking to someone and she like misunderstands what they're saying, and so for the rest of the book she just operates under this assumption without asking him questions. And then the entire time that they are, you know, in this weird relationship, whatever, that's like romance but not romance, because they're like fake dating as well, to try to convince Jacob's family that he has a girlfriend, that he's happy because he also went through a breakup. It's like this whole thing, and she just won't fully give herself over to him because she is operating under this weird assumption, and the miscommunication trope is just out of fucking control. And then my least favorite trope of 10 happened at the end of the book, and it was kind of crazy. I don't know, I just didn't like it. So honestly, as I'm saying this out loud, I also want to give this book 2 stars, but I just loved Jacob so much as a male lead. Like, he carried the book for me. He was so great. He was simping for Bree whole time. He was just so kind, such a good character. Also, he struggled with like clinical anxiety, and I felt like it was a really interesting and like good depiction of it. But other than that, this book kind of sucked. So sorry to say it. It's probably like a 2.5 for me. Our final 3-star book is Yumi and the Night Painter by Brandon Sanderson. This is one of his special projects books, and I was very excited to read this because I do have the special edition copy with all the illustrations in it, and I was a little bit disappointed because this book feels a little young adult. Like, it's following these characters that I believe they're like 18. So the Night Painter character, he goes by Night Painter. He lives in a place where there is no more sunlight, like the sun has disappeared, and so he has to go around at night in the shadows because there's these monsters that come out and he has to paint in order to get them to go away. They're considered nightmares. Other main character is this girl named Yumi, and she is what they call a yokihijo, and she's a religious figure that has to do all these rituals, and she balances these rocks to like make the spirits happy. And as she balances the rocks, the spirits come out and they like grant her wishes and whatnot. And so one day the Night Painter goes to sleep and he wakes up in Yumi's body and he doesn't know why he's there. And then they realize that they have to, you know, accomplish something in order to figure things out. And then when they go back to sleep, Yumi wakes up in the painter's world, and so it kind of is them going back and forth in each other's worlds, and it has a very strong like sci-fi element. Like there is some technology and different things happening, and there's definitely some characters from the Cosmere that show up, but ultimately for me I just found it a little bit booing. Like I thought it kind of lagged. Also, Brandon Sanderson said that this was his most romantic book because he wrote it for his wife as like sort of like a romance, and I just didn't enjoy it. Apparently he was also inspired by some anime. Like I think there's an anime called Your Name and then another anime that he was inspired by, and he wrote that in the acknowledgements at the end that he just wanted to write like a heavily Japanese inspired type of story because that's definitely how it felt. But I was just a little bit bored while I was reading it. So it is a very solid 3-star. Like I don't think there's anything wrong with this book. I just don't think it was for me. I also thought the Night Painter character was just very immature, and I liked Yumi way more than I liked him. So I wasn't really shipping them. And that's kind of that on that. We're moving on to the 2-star books. The first of these is The Writing Retreat. This is one that I also read for Reading Booktuber's Worst of the Year. This was by far the book that showed up on the most lists. It was crazy how much people hated this, but it was also crazy how much people loved this book. It was very divisive. You either loved it or you hated it. And unfortunately, I did end up on the hating side. But let me just say, the first half of this book had me because it's about this like toxic friendship. Our main character is a writer, and she really looks up to this one author who is very famous for writing these like gritty female rage type like literary fiction type books. And basically she's always loved this author, and this author has these writing retreats, and so she wants to get invited to the writing retreat. So she does end up getting an opportunity to go, but she has this ex-best friend that she has a very complicated relationship with, and she also gets invited to the writing retreat, so they have to go together. So again, the first half is like this homoerotic female friendship, super interesting. I was vibing so much, and the author obviously has some weird shit going on at her mansion. And so as we get further in the book, we find out more about the writer and like don't meet your heroes kind of thing. But the second half of this book just goes off the rails. And also the big thing that's like on the back of the book, on the flap, it says that someone's going to go missing, and that's going to be the big thing. But this doesn't happen until like the 60% mark. So the second half obviously is us trying to figure out what happened to her and like what's going on, but it's just so boring, and the twists and the turns were just kind of dumb. Very, very dumb. And so I did not end up loving this as much as I wanted to. And at first I was like, okay, it's a 4-star. And then I was like, okay, it's a 3-star. And then by the end of it, I was like, no, this is a 2-star. And the only reason I'm giving it 2 stars is because the first half did have me. Up next, we have The Bandit Queens. This takes place in India, and it's following this woman whose husband went missing 5 years ago, and everyone in her small village thinks that she killed him, and so she's known as like the husband killer. And then one day these women in her village start coming to her because they want to get rid of their husbands, and they're asking her how to do it. I've seen a lot of people compare this to Finley Donovan is Killing It, because that's also about a character who has to become like an assassin sort of thing. And so that's kind of what our main character does, except there's actually murdering. And so she kind of has all this stuff going on, and it's examining a lot of different issues in the village and the caste system and drinking and all these different things that affect this particular village and the society. And I really loved the first half of this. I thought it was really interesting, but then by the second half I just got fatigued from the story. I thought it was boring, and it also gets very convoluted in the second half. Something about me is, if you're gonna get convoluted in the second half, I better be entertained, and I was not entertained on this one. I also feel like there was a lot of unnecessary like fat phobia in this, and there was also some dog abuse that I didn't love. And so overall, this just wasn't really what I was hoping. Again, it had me in the first half, but it lost me in the second half. Okay, another book that I read for Patreon is Dark Water Daughter. I actually read it for the same Patreon video where I read Amina Al-Sarafi, because I was like, let's put the pirate books against each other. And so basically this is following this girl who is a storm singer. And so that means like when she sings, she can like cause storms and control the ocean. And her mom was a very famous storm singer who went missing. And so she's kind of on this journey trying to find her mother, and so she has to partner up with these pirates. And then there's like this evil pirate who's trying to hunt her down, and there's a pirate hunter who's trying to get her and get the evil pirate, and there's just so many different things going on. And this book was so boring. I also felt very young adult for it being adult fantasy. Like there was a love triangle at one point. So ultimately it did end up being a 2-star book, and I have not really thought about it much since I read it until we're talking about it now. I also read The Reformatory for Gabby Reed's book club. We did a live show where we talked about this, and I'm so sorry to say that I gave this 2 stars. So sorry. I felt so bad going on Gabby's channel for the first time and being like, I don't like this book, especially because the content of this book is very serious and very important. I just felt like the execution of the story was so long and boring. I know I keep saying boring, but that is a sin to me. This is a book following a young black boy named Robert, and it's historical. I can't remember exactly what year it takes place. I think it takes place in like the 40s or the 50s. And so obviously there is a lot of racism going on. They also live in the South. And at the start of the book, Robert kicks a white boy who's like very important in the town. And so he gets sent off to this reformatory school where a lot of kids don't make it out. And there's also ghosts at the school, and he can see ghosts. And so kind of follows him on this journey. We're also following his sister Gloria, who's trying to get him out of the school and try to save him. So there's like some civil rights stuff going on. And all of that was very interesting, and it was very historically accurate. Tanana Reeve actually did a lot of research. She said it took her 10 years to write this book, and apparently she decided to write it because she had a distant cousin, uncle person like in her family named Robert who did have to go to one of these schools, and he ended up dying there. And so it was written in honor of him, and it was very horrific, the stuff that was going on at the school, and it was very eye-opening to know that this is, you know, part of our history and things that would happen. So obviously I loved that that's what the book was about, but the actual execution of the story was very slow. This book is well over 500 pages, and I believe wholeheartedly that it could have been at least 200 pages shorter. It was so long, and I really didn't enjoy Gloria's point of view. Like, I loved Robert's chapters at the actual school, and there's this whole plot line where when Robert's at the school to get in with the warden, he ends up becoming like a ghost hunter, and I didn't really love that plot line either. It just didn't really deliver on like what I thought the book was going to be about, and so I feel really bad giving it 2 stars because there is so much historical significance and so much you can learn from it, but I think the pacing ultimately just like really killed the book for me, and so I just didn't like it, unfortunately. Our final 2-star book is Strange Practice by Vivian Shaw. This was my book club pick for my Patreon book club, and I wanted to read this because the cover is a sleigh. The premise sounds amazing. It's about this woman named Greta Helsing, and she is a doctor for supernatural creatures. She looks after vampires and mummies and banshees and all these like really cool creatures. There is this cult that's going around killing people in London, and so it's about her and her little vampire friends and werewolf friends and whatever type of paranormal creature friends getting together to solve what's going on and figure out what's going on with this cult. And you would think all of that would be fascinating, would sound amazing, but it was not. It was so boring, and there is this romance that's budding in it because it's a series that I just was not interested in. I also felt like it would have been a lot better if it had been a historical book, like historical fantasy, because the present day was just kind of killing the vibes as well. And it wasn't a very long book, like it was normal length, but it just felt kind of it just felt So a lot of people in my Patreon also didn't like it. We all voted for it in the poll because we're like, that book sounds great. And I put it on there because it's been on my TBR forever. Like, someone recommended it to me in my comments, but I'm very sorry to whoever recommended it because I really thoroughly did not like it. But let's get into these 1-star books. I have 4 of them. The first one being One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This has been on my TBR for so long because this is one of Taylor Jenkins Reid's backlist books that everyone talks about being so amazing, and there was even a movie made off of it with Philippa Sue, and so I was really excited. But unfortunately, this book was so bad it gave me a panic attack. I just did not like it at all. We're following this main character who is in a bit of a pickle because she was married to her high school sweetheart, the love of her life, and he ends up going on this trip, I think to Alaska, and he's in a helicopter and he ends up crashing and going missing, and so he's declared dead, and our main character is devastated. And she ends up moving to her hometown, and she runs into this other guy that she also used to have a crush on in high school, but they start a relationship and then they end up getting engaged, and now she's like restarting her life. And just as things are going really well, her husband comes back from the dead and he's like, hey bitch, let's get back together. And so she is left thinking, oh my god, what do I do? Who do I go be with? And it's a crazy plot that gave me so so much anxiety because the choices that this female character makes are so crazy. Like, she does and says a lot of things that I understand. I've never been in this situation, and maybe she acted the way that any of us would act, but I was stressed. It wasn't like Taylor Jenkins Reid's later books, like Evelyn Hugo or Daisy Jones. It didn't feel like that. It just felt very like Lifetime movie vibes. And so I did not like this book at all, and I don't really understand all the girlies who are saying that they love it. Up next, we have The Wishing Game. I wish I had not read. That's the game that I'm trying to play. We're following a character who is in her early 20s, and she is like an assistant teacher. There is this little boy in her class that I think is like 6 years old who she really wants to adopt, but she's like literally 24 years old and she has no money. So of course they're like, you cannot adopt him. She's like, but I want to. So she has this weird relationship with him where she tells him all the time, I'm gonna adopt you. And he's like, yes, you're gonna adopt me. And I think that's really crazy that you would do that with a 6-year-old. But anyway, she enters this contest from this childhood author that she absolutely loved. And basically he is giving away his newest manuscript. Like, he hasn't written a book in over 15 years, and he's like, anybody who can come to my island and like solve all these riddles and like do all this stuff and like play this game is gonna win my manuscript, and they get to do what they want with it. So she actually ends up being invited to come to the island because she has this long past with this author where when she was a kid she actually ran away from home and tried to go to his island so she could be like his little assistant, like sidekick, and he had to send her back to her parents. But you would think that a book about people playing games would be more about the games, but there are no games. There's also a really weird romance happening between the main character and this guy who's like the cover artist of all the childhood books. He is, I think, like over 10 years older than our character, and when we go back in the past and like see the memory of when she came to the island, so she's had a crush on him ever since she met him when she was a child. And he's like, yeah, I remember meeting you. It would be one thing if the author had been like, he's like, you know, I don't remember meeting you, but I'm glad we can connect now as adults and be in love, because their age gap isn't that weird. But then he's like, yes, I remember exactly the day that you came as a child, and I met you when you were a child. Like, you were a child when I met you. And they just like keep hammering in that point, and I just really didn't like it. And I feel like this book was just trying to do too much at once, and I don't really understand the hype around this. A lot of people say it's cozy. I do not agree. I also found out that the author, I can't remember what name it is the same author who goes by the pen name Tiffany Rice. I don't know which one is her real name. Tiffany Rice is a romance author that I've actually read for some of my drunk literacies, like when I read this like Halloween romance, and I absolutely hated her writing when I read that too. So I realized that I don't like Tiffany Rice. I don't like her at all. Up next, we have The 7-Year Slip. I know this is going to be disappointing to a lot of people because this is a very beloved book by many. I thought this book was horseshit. I thought it was boring. I thought it was so boring. I thought the writing was bad. I thought the pacing was bad. I thought the characters were bad. Everything about it I thought was bad. This is a magical realism romance book set in New York City about this girl who moves into her aunt's apartment. Her aunt recently passed away and they were like really close, and she inherited her apartment. So she moves in, but her aunt always told her that this apartment was magical. So sometimes when you leave and come back, it will randomly transport you back 7 years exactly. And so her aunt tells her like this whole story about how her apartment used to travel back and she was like in love with this woman, blah, blah, blah. And so then when Clementine, the main character, moves in, same thing happens where she goes back and she meets this guy named Ewan. I do need you guys to understand, like, people were calling me out on this when I did the thing. The audiobook pronounced it Ewan. It's I-W-A-N. I would have assumed that it was Ewan, like Ewan McGregor. Like, that's how you would pronounce it. That seems like a Scottish name. It goes by Ewan. I don't know why the audiobook narrator did that, but I'm just letting you know that I am not making it up, but that's how that was pronounced in the book. They have one weekend together and they end up falling madly in love, even though they literally spend like 2 days together. And then the apartment like doesn't go back for a long time. And so she works in publishing, and then they are approaching this guy who's a chef to try to get him to write like a celebrity memoir thing. And it ends up being Ewan. But now he's going by his first name, James, because apparently Ewan is his middle name. And he's very different now. It's like 7 years later and he's very different. And so now Clementine's confused because she's like, this isn't the Ewan that I met in the past. And there's a couple of times like throughout their romance that she goes back in time to Ewan, and it's just really weird. It's giving like love triangle vibes, except for the guy is the same person. I'm so sorry to everyone who loved this book, because everyone under the sun loved this book except for me, but I am not one of you, and I'm so sorry. And then the final book that we're going to talk about in this book bomb situation is Distorted by Nyla K, which is a book that I actually talked about very recently. You might have seen it when I went to visit Riley in Texas. We did a collab where we talked about reading forbidden romance. It was very funny. You should go watch it. Distorted is following this guy named Dash, who ends up going to prison for robbing a bank. but he doesn't have a trial when he goes to prison. He just wakes up one day in this crazy penitentiary, Alabaster penitentiary. Penitentiary? Is that how you say it? Anyway, he wakes up in this prison and he's like, oh my God, how did I get here? And they're like, you robbed a bank and we brought you here. This is where we send the criminals that are supposed to be forgotten about, the criminals that nobody wants. The thing is that all the prison guards are very corrupt and they will have sex with the prisoners. And so Dash keeps getting sent to solitary confinement, and the guy that's down there, the officer, ends up essaying him quite a lot, and there is a gay romance that ensues. And this book was nearly unreadable. It was so bad. I beg of you to go watch the video where I talked about the plot in great depth because it was so crazy. The twist in this book, it's probably one of the dumbest things that I've ever experienced in my life. But that brings me to the end of this mukbang. I'll eat one more sushi for you. If you've made it to the end of this video and you enjoyed it, feel free to use the sushi emoji. Obviously, that makes the most sense. Let me know if you have any ideas for other little activities and things I can do in the future for reading wrap-ups, and just let me know what you've been reading lately. I thank you all so much for watching. You're all beautiful. Have a nice day. Oh, I can't reach.